Hey, good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Good morning, Amen.
Good morning. And yes, please, we can hear you.
Okay. Right. So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Volume 2, Number 4 of Consumer Knowledge and Experience Series. Today, we are honored to have Engineer Mrs. Jane Naki-Teteanui as our distinguished speaker. She is an environmental engineer with over 18 years of experience in environmental assessments, specializing in infrastructure projects funded by international lending institutions. Her impressive career includes work on roads, buildings, power generation, and water supply in Ghana. She is not only a corporate member of the International Association of Impact Assessment and Ghana Institution of Engineering, but she also serves as the Vice President of Women in Engineering Ghana. Her passion extends to promoting workplace safety and environmental stewardship. Beyond her professional achievements, she enjoys cooking, gardening, singing, event organizing, and hiking. She's a proud mother of 2 and a dedicated spouse with a decade of marriage life. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Engineer Mrs. Jane Naki-Teteanui, who will share her insights on achieving sustainability in infrastructure projects through inclusion and social equity. Good morning, Engineer.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for having me.
Okay.
So we're talking about understanding sustainability in the context of infrastructure. And we all know that sustainability, when it comes to infrastructure projects, we're talking about the practice of planning, designing, constructing, and maintaining infrastructure in a way that minimizes the environmental, social, and economic impact, while promoting long-term resilience, efficiency, and positive outcomes. So sustainability or sustainable infrastructure requires holistic approach. And we need to look at it, not just the immediate needs, but then we should look at it in such a way that when whatever infrastructure we're producing, we are looking at the long term, we are looking at the future. We are not going to destroy what is in the environment, the societal cohesion and all that, but we're thinking about the future generations, so that when we leave the scene, those who come in will not suffer. So I'll talk about the three components of infrastructure, sustainable infrastructure. So we're looking at environmental sustainability, economic sustainability, and then social sustainability. When we talk about environmental sustainability, we'll be looking at energy efficiency. So sustainable, we are aiming at minimizing resource consumption and waste generation. We're also looking at using renewables to minimize the impact of construction and operation of infrastructure projects we have. We're looking at energy efficiency, where design should be energy efficient and our operations are such that it reduces our carbon footprint, it reduces the greenhouse gas emissions and to the environment. We're looking at biodiversity and ecosystem protection. We know how construction can sometimes affect our ecosystem, and we need to protect it. And our designs should be such that we are able to protect habitat, be able to maintain biodiversity, and where we are not able to be able to mitigate it some way, somehow, to reduce the impact on our wildlife and other ecosystems. We'll look at we are thinking of resilience and adaptation. We need to do designs that are resilient to the environment and social changes. And I mean, we are all witnesses to what is happening even in our country today. Yes, and we've seen a lot of extreme weather changes all over the world. Around this time, we don't expect so much rain because it's a minor season. But then again, at least for where I live on the mountain, these 2 days has been horrible with the rains, if lack of better words. So things are changing. We need to involve local, national, and international guidelines and regulations, and we should be adhering to these things so that we can meet, we can make projects long-term projects viable, and then we reduces our financial risk and our legal risk. We also will look at economic sustainability. So those in the economic side will be looking at their life cycle costing, return of investment. And we also can leverage on private and public partnership so that everybody brings the expertise, the resources together so that we can have sustainable, government alone cannot do most of the things, especially when it comes to maintenance. So if there's a private partner, public partnership, it helps with these things. Social sustainability, so looking at community engagement. We need to involve communities and local areas in decision making so that it helps projects more sustainable, because then we can address their needs and concerns. We can enhance their quality of life. We will talk that we're talking about equity and inclusion, which we will talk about today, and then we'll talk about adaptability, how societal changes, how future technology and all that are flexible enough in our project. So as I said, it's a holistic thing from beginning, from design to operations to maintenance. We need, especially community engagement, we need it to be able to see how best we can accommodate all needs and all challenges and address them. We can have effective, sustainable infrastructure when we do long-term planning, as I said earlier, on compliance and certification, green technology, what's happening, what's new, what are we technologies that we are using that will reduce our greenhouse gases and all that, emissions, effective lighting, reducing environmental impact, reducing our energy consumption and all. And then we need to look at our risk assessment right from design stage. So conceptualizing inclusion and social equity in infrastructure. So this is what brought me the trouble of being asked to be here because of, I think, something I said. So inclusion and social equity are critical, very, very critical and crucial when in contributing in getting sustainable infrastructure projects. Because you're dealing with the human beings, the users, the people, the community in which the project is going to happen. So it's about the people. And you want them all to be part of it, buy into it, be part of it. And we also want a fair share, everybody has a fair share of infrastructure projects. So when there's inclusion and there's social equity, you realize that projects are able to come up, projects are able to stay, projects are able to look after because the people are part of it. So inclusion is the principle and practice of ensuring that all members of the community have equal access and participation in the benefits and opportunities generated by the project. Equal access and participation. We it's not like you're having a project and only some people decide on it and some people in the village sit somewhere or in a city and decide what they think is good for everybody. Meanwhile, someone somewhere cannot access it and cannot use it. And because it wasn't even included at design stage, he couldn't bring out the challenges for it to be addressed. Equity is to ensure fairness and justice in the distribution of the benefits and the burden associated with planning, designing, construction, and operation of infrastructure. This one helps us to reduce disparity and promote an equitable and just society. So everybody has a share of the cake. We don't say people are living here and so they don't matter. And so some things has to go somewhere. But fair distribution. So what we can do is to promote inclusion in infrastructure is to create equal access. Inclusion, when we're talking about promoting inclusion in infrastructure projects, is to create equal access. That is to ensure that the design and construction is to provide equal access and usability for all members of the community, including those with disabilities and other special needs. Most of our structures and most of our even commercial places don't have access for disability. It's not inclusive enough. Unfortunately, parts of the country, some people have access to power, some people don't have access to power. Some have access to internet, some don't. We are doing our best as a nation, but we need to make sure that everybody is involved. And when we are planning projects and we are deciding to do infrastructure projects in any community, as much as possible, we need to put in things that would make each and everyone have access to the project and be able to use it. We need also to promote participation in the decision making. So let people have a say in what we are about to put up, even at the design stage, even at the conceptual. I mean, when you are thinking of the project, people will have to get a say. People in the community, the users, everybody must have a say so that when they have needs, it could be easily identified and designs and all things can be done to address it for everybody to be included. Representation. We need to look at the demographics of the group in the community and make sure that those who are marginalized and underrepresented are all represented. So you realize that in most, when we're doing stakeholder engagement and stuff, we try to group people in such a way that they can feel free to address their needs. And so we need representation across board. We need also to be culturally sensitive, respecting the cultural heritage and values of community when designing and implementing infrastructure projects. We need to be sensitive. We have a story. We had a project in the Volta region somewhere, and the contractor was trying to do a storm drain or a culvert. I think it's a culvert. And there was a tree just at the end of the culvert. And anytime they try to do the blinding, the next moment, for some reason, it rains, the thing goes away. And so we're told that before we can continue, we have to pacify the tree, which is a god to them. And so initially, the contractor was a bit was dragging his feet and said, this is what they do, this is their culture. You need to do it. He understood, he did it, and the project went on. So we need to be sensitive. We need to know what they hold dear. We need to know their heritage, what they value as a community, and be sensitive in our design. I can tell you a project where a building was relocated, a small building, which is a shrine. Usually you think that a building will face a road. I mean, the frontage will be facing the road. But this is where they said, no matter what it is, the frontage had to be skewed towards a certain tree. And it has to be done. So these are some of the things that can happen. You are respecting their cultural values. We need to empower our community to be able to have a say when it comes to decision making. So as we're doing the participation, they need empowerment to, certain communities, some people can talk, some people cannot talk, we need some empowerment so that they'll be able to have a say. When we're promoting social equity, we want to reduce disparities. And we do that so that we ensure that everybody benefits. Projects are distributed fairly across all community members, so that it's not like some people in the community are privileged to have it and use it whilst others are not. We also should be thinking about affordability. If it's something that's going to provide service, we should do it. We should do it in such a way that they can afford, people can afford the service that you be given. So you don't marginalize people, you don't let the vulnerable also, you let the vulnerable also benefit from it. We're looking at health and safety. Social equity in infrastructure aims to ensure that safety and well-being of all residents, especially those in the vulnerable and disadvantaged communities, by addressing the environmental hazards and all the hazards that comes with construction. It's not like we're going to put, and their health, we are going to put a project here, so we went there, build, whatever happened to the community, oh, we don't care, then we leave. No. We need to make sure that during construction, during operation, the health and safety of the community is addressed. Whatever concerns there is addressed. We also need to create economic opportunities when we are doing these projects. Creating jobs, business opportunities within the community, especially for the underprivileged groups. We need environmental justice. And that's when we try to mitigate some of the negative consequences that comes with projects, especially in low income or minority communities. So that we don't say, oh, I had what it is, that we just build and go. No. Whether we cut trees and we're supposed to replace. So this community, what do they need the trees for? No. If you are cutting, you are replacing. Not because it's a low income community. So you're going to do what you want, and there should be environmental justice. We're looking at equity, metrics, and monitoring. So then you need clear monitoring mechanisms to ensure that the impacts on different demographics are known, track progress, identify disparities, and make necessary adjustments to address any inequities that come. So we have to look at some of the social and environmental impacts of projects. It's a lot, but at least I just put something down for us. We have habitat disruption, which we know, clearing vegetation for any infrastructure project. Definitely, there will be some disruption here and there. So we need to take note of that and do habitat restoration. Sometimes the restoration may not be exactly in the community, but then there's an offset somewhere just to compensate for what you have described. Make sure that your distraction is not wide. It's not going to affect, have endangered species and all that. So studies has to be done properly, and so that we don't lose biodiversity and displacement of wildlife. Resource consumption, energy and materials are used in these designs and construction of our project. As much as possible, we should look at minimizing it and looking for alternatives that will not affect the environment so much. Emissions and pollution, should look at it very well. Air pollution, water, these are things that happen during projects. And we would want to go towards green infrastructure and cleaner technologies so that we can mitigate these things. Water management is also critical because it can affect the hydrology, the local hydrology of the project area, and the water quality of the water bodies around. So if you plan your project properly, you can avoid these things. And if you don't plan them well, it can lead to flooding, erosion, scarcity of water. You alter the river and groundwater flow and contaminate these water resources. So proper management has to be put in place. Proper drainage systems are vital. And then the famous climate change. And we all know what's happening in our world now. So it's something that now is critical, especially when you're doing assessment for projects. You need to look at it and make sure that your projects are climate resilient to be able to adapt to the changing weather patterns and future risks. We want to look at a bit of the social issues. This economic opportunity is a good one. It's not always the bad one anyway. It's always bad things in impact, but there's some good. And even some of the bad can be turned to good if it's done properly. So you have economic opportunity. When projects come into a community, it gives opportunity, give economic opportunity to people. Yes, people get employed, people are able to sell here and there, local economies improve, it stimulates local economy. Have access when they are projects, they have access to markets. If it's a road project, for instance, now you have access to markets and to other social amenities easily, and livelihood is improved. Community displacement and disruption. Yes, activities, especially construction, can disrupt community. It can displace residents and cause inconveniences due to noise, dust, traffic congestion, and all these things has to be managed properly to minimize the social stress. Because some social networks can break because some traditions can break because of these constructions. And so that people don't, because we don't want people to lose their sense of belonging, we need to address issues carefully and make sure that we mitigate them. The health and safety of the community, as I've said earlier on, we need infrastructure actually supposed to help with public health and safety, but during construction, sometimes operations, the opposite can happen. So proper planning has to be done, proper health and safety plans have to be put in place and implemented so that people can get better sanitation, clean water supply, and communities can be disaster resilient so that we don't have a risk of health hazards and safety hazards in the community. Infrastructure help us access to service, as I said. If you have infrastructure such as road, utilities. It enhances access to education, healthcare, and other essential services. The only thing about it is that we also have to look at it on the other side, is that it doesn't lead to gentrification. That is pushing out low-income residents due to their poverty situation. So you don't do projects where accesses are only for those who can afford or those that are rich and affluent in the society. You're not pushing somebody from her home to build something because you think he can't afford the area and has to move. So gentrification has to be something to look at. For social equity, we don't want to increase the inequalities in society. So then we want to look at all the people involved, including the marginalized or the vulnerable. Consider them in our planning and the benefits so that we all can enjoy the project. And then we need to, as I said earlier, cultural and historical preservation is critical. You don't go in and destroy these things. So what can we do? I've said one of the critical things that we need to do is have environmental social. In Ghana we say EIA, but actually it's environmental and social impact assessment. In the other jurisdiction, the S show up, but in Ghana our law somehow omitted the S, but it's part of it, with mitigation measures to address some of these things. We need to adhere to social sustainable standards in designs and all that helps the project to be sustainable. You're looking at now and the future. So public engagement is critical, as I said, for inclusion and equity. Everybody has to be involved and everybody has to be engaged. Everybody's opinion has to be heard. Life cycle analysis has to be done. The resilience of the infrastructure we are producing, considering future climate change impact and all those things has to be done. Governments must have oversight of these and ensure that all the laws and regulations are enforced to make sure that the project aligns with our social and environmental goals. Incentives and funding. Government can encourage people to have sustainable infrastructure through incentives, funding, and tax breaks. So that, I mean, when somebody's putting an infrastructure, you consider all this and say, oh, if my project is rated A, I get something. So then as much as possible, everybody would strive to make sure that he gets an A to get an A. Who doesn't like a tax relief? Everybody likes it. Who doesn't want discounts? Everybody wants it. So we can look at these things too. Okay. So the role of stakeholder and community engagement in ensuring inclusion. So stakeholders and community play very, very, very important role, ensuring that everybody is involved. So when I was looking for a picture, I went through all the projects I've done and I saw this one. You can see the little boy. Everybody's in. It's a small village near the Volta Lake. So that's small, there's some few houses. So everybody was there, including my little boy in there. So everybody is included here. And it helps inclusion, engagement plays vital role in ensuring that inclusion in various aspects of society, organization, decision-making process is very, very critical. And you would want to understand them. First of all, you'd want to understand your stakeholders. And your stakeholders can be individuals. It could be your groups, it could be organizations, anyone that has interest or are affected by a particular project, a policy or an initiative is a stakeholder. Next slide. Next slide, please. So your stakeholder can be the local community, could be customers, depending on whatever, if it's an infrastructure service that is where you have. Your employees are government agencies, NGOs, anybody interested in it, anybody who has a stake in it is a stakeholder. How to analyze them? You need to define the scope and objective of your analysis. What do you want to know? What do you want to do? What do you want to achieve? You identify the key stakeholders and distinguish their influence and interest levels. Some people are just, their interest is not much. Some people are actually affected. So you need to analyze and see everybody's influence on the project, everybody's level of interest. If let's say you're doing a road in Ebri, those of you in Accra, your interest will not be as much as those of us living here. So, but you are still a stakeholder because it's a national project, and you would want to have a stake in it. But then interest levels may not be the same. We need to assess the inclusion of marginalized groups. So in a community, you should be able to see whether in Ghana, I think we don't really have indigenous people, but in some elsewhere, there are people who are, we call them indigenous people. And you have, you need to look out for all these things, people and their interests, and they are all your stakeholders that you have to deal with. We want to get feedback from them and identify common themes and group them so that you can easily work with them and address issues. You want to make sure that you evaluate the impact of the stakeholders' input in the decision making. And then you have to consider transparency and accountability mechanisms. You really have to consider these. When you're dealing with people and they lose trust, there's a whole thing you don't want to deal with that. So you make sure that there are accountability mechanisms in place. There's transparency in whatever you're doing concerning the project. You want to ensure legal and ethical compliance. There are a lot of laws around that you need to make sure that you are complying ethically in the field you are in. You need to make sure you are compliant in the ethics of the profession. Assess your resources available and support you can give to the stakeholders. Develop inclusivity metrics and collect data and feedback so that it helps you with your planning and design and all that. Compare your findings to the conclusion goals that you have actually put out before you set out to do this work, and identify the gaps and see how you can address them. Provide recommendation, and as always, provide a comprehensive report and communicate your findings always. So public disclosure is very, very important. You need to communicate. Next slide, please. So why do we want to do this analysis of our stakeholders? We want to do that so that we know that everybody is represented. We have diverse range of voices and perspectives. Everybody's voice is heard, and this diversity helps to avoid biases and making informed and inclusive decisions. So representation and diversity one of the reasons why we want to analyze your stakeholders and community engagement. It helps us identify the needs of the community. It helps you understand, have a deeper understanding of their specific needs, challenges, and aspirations. And you have it for the various groups that you've dealt with. So it helps your solution agenda. It helps promote social equity. I think I've said that. Accountability is very, very important when you do stakeholder engagement, community, so that, I mean, in the process, everybody knows what's happening. Everybody knows the needs and expectations of the community. You're able to resolve conflict. Yes, when you engage, you resolve conflict easily. And I've said again that Pokuase interchange, as it is, was a success, not only because of the bricks, the mortar, and the reinforcement that has been put there. But Pokuase was successful because of a continuous engagement with the people. We're able to resolve conflict easily because we're always with them and always engaging. So you help conflict resolution. Those even went to court later, decided to let it be because they came to understand. You build trust. It helps with better decision making. And at the end of the day, we'll have sustainable development. So that's why you have to analyze the roles of the various stakeholders and engage the community to help you get the inclusion you need in your project. And when project, some time passed, I drove past some communities. I forgot either on ECR, one of the corridors. I realized a lot of markets were built, but the women were still selling by the roadside. It's a very common picture in most of our rural areas. And I can bet you that they were not consulted to ask them what they needed or where the market should be for them. So the compromise would be made before the construction. Oh, we have to provide a market. We want to build a market, but I left them. They will go to where they want to be. So very, very important. You need to engage the people. And with that, you can easily resolve issues. This picture you are seeing is one of the meetings that was being held to resolve an issue of some affected project people. Let's move on. I'll quickly go through the challenges and barriers that worries us, that we can have this social equity in our project. Resource allocation and funding. I mean, this one, everybody, I don't even have to say it. We know it. We know what the funding issues we have. Sometimes the rich and the affluent are able to have their way and have more amenities whilst others are suffering. Access and connectivity. Low-income areas don't have access to a lot of infrastructure service, even transportation. Maybe a car goes there once in a day at a particular time because the road is so bad, no vehicle would want to go there. Drive so many miles just to get access to health care and even education. I mean, these are stories that we all know. And as I sit here and I'm having connectivity issues because there's no broadband in this area because they assume that it won't be of any benefit to them. So we don't have broadband here. You have to get the other ones, which is not so effective. So yes, access and connectivity. Environmental justice. Infrastructure projects can be disproportionately affect marginalized communities. So let's build a factory here, let's pollute the place and go. After all, the people there, what did they know? Community engagement, which we don't do. I live in a place where we actually live at one of the places where we have the backbone of all the telcos and the TV radio stations. And I just wonder how overnight a mast is built with no consultations for us in the area. You wake up and somebody's building a mast. And you ask and they said they've been given permits and all that to do that. And when they are supposed to maintain, means you have to move everything on your compound away because you will have paint all over your house. Because nobody engaged us. Nobody is telling us this is going to happen. Even when you're going to do it, tell us so we move our stuff from the compound. Nothing happened. So these are some of the bottlenecks, the challenges. We have so many complex bureaucratic processes that hinders people from serving the marginalized community. And it has to be looked at. Some people want to do things for community, but because there's so much regulations and complex stuff to deal with, they would rather not do it. Land rights and displacement is one of the things. Until recently, resettlement was not a big deal in our country. But now I think we are looking at it and I think we are doing well. That's the aspect. Education and skills gap is also an issue. The digital divide is an issue. As I said, some towns will not even have internet by now. We have historical bias policies and planning, which also doesn't help equity. And then inadequate data collection and monitoring. It makes it even difficult to assess projects on equity basis because there's no data. Our data, we don't manage our data well, so we are not able to monitor properly. How do we address these? We need to define social equity objectives. I hope I'm in time. Equitable resource allocation. We need to have, I've spoken about these things, so I'm just repeating them because it's the opposite of what I've said already. Community engagement has to be done. Legal framework has to be looked at. Housing and displacement also has to be looked at. We need to bridge the gap in education and skills. Local hiring and training is very, very important. At least we need to bridge the digital divide. We need to collect data properly and analyze to help monitoring. And transparency and accountability is also important. Successful projects. Okay, so I'll talk briefly about Pokwasi Interchange. Pokwasi Interchange was designed by Associated Consultant, where I work with, and it was a 4-tier interchange, second in Africa, I think, and first in West Africa. In Africa, yes. And inclusion, as I said, everybody was included. This project is one of the projects I've seen where every stakeholder was included. Engagement was not just before the project, pre-project. We did pre-project engagement. During project, it was a daily affair. Our engagement was a daily affair. We had teams that went on doing the legwork, going every day, and we had a redress mechanism that was very, very efficient. And we had a redress committee, where included you see the project has 4 quadrants. You see 4 different, every group was represented. Market women, taxi drivers, we had tanker drivers who served the community with water and we had, the project was so sensitive that it was close to a shrine and two streams, 3 gods. a whole lot of things that happened on this project, but because everybody was on board, everybody, opinion leaders, whoever that you can think of, was part of this project as a stakeholder, and we're engaging them on a daily basis. We had it easy. As I said, you will see it's beautiful. You're seeing the structure standing there, but the success of the project is not only the engineering bit of it, but it's because everybody in that community and beyond was included in this project. And everybody's opinion mattered. And everybody's decision that we thought would help the project was taken on board. There are lot of local projects that have done that we've gone through with these inclusion, making sure that the vulnerable, the disabled, whatever you want to think of is included. But I've just talked about Pokuase, and I'll talk about a foreign one. This is Singapore Universal Design. I just went for a conference there. They spoke about it and how inclusivity was part of it, and the engagement that goes on. It's like at every stage of the housing project, they do extensive engagement with the stakeholders, to the point that it looks like Singapore, everybody in the working class automatically owns a house because of how it's done. Affordability is looked at, so they build for different categories of people and all that. And when the presentation was being done, I felt, and when I got this, I said, let me showcase it. It's not only in Ghana, but we should know that it's not only happening in Ghana where everybody is engaged, but elsewhere too, people are doing the same thing. So, and I went to a place where I saw that the housing units being constructed to meet the needs of the other people. And it's beautiful. So inclusion is very, very critical. That's why they've been able to get their money and doing more housing projects for everybody to own a house in Singapore. It's because they prioritize the people, the stakeholders have a say in the project, how it's done and what will benefit them. So quickly, some of these tools, I'm sure we are all aware of them. So with survey and questionnaires, focus group discussions, looking at case studies cases that has happened. You're identifying and you're analyzing and you're monitoring. You are doing audits. All these things are to make sure that your project is sustainable and everybody is included. So on this note, I would say thank you very much for having me. If anybody has questions.
Okay. Thank you very much, Engineer, for this insightful presentation this morning. I think we can allow a few questions to come through before we wrap up this morning's session. So like we usually do, if you have a question, you just have your hand raised and then Engineer will attend to your question. I see Isaac Akwa has his hand up. Isaac, you can go ahead with your question, please.
All right. Good morning, and then thank you, Madam, for such a wonderful presentation. I have a few questions I want to get clarification, like the inclusion of if you come to design, especially let's take a staircase, for example, or an overhead, we can know how to include the cripple, sorry to say, into it. I want an instance, if you can enlighten me on how we include the blind in our designs and all that, maybe some few examples of how we include the blind. And then you made an example of a market that was built, but the people were not using it. And it suggests that maybe the engagement was not thoroughly done.
Yeah.
I want to ask, in a conflict, when we have conflicting views, maybe the engagement with the people, they are looking at their economic reasons to choose where their market should be. But accident records or safety reasons is also telling you by engineering principle, telling you to move the people from that particular
Yes.
location. Instead, what do we do? Do we compromise their views, or how do we solve this conflict? Thank you.
Okay. I hope I remember all the questions. Yes, including the blind. You see, elsewhere they use sound. Unfortunately, for here, I've not really. Where you get to, let's say, a crossing, and when it's time for pedestrians to cross, you can actually hear voice saying, and then they have markers to, they have their own markers along route and stuff. But unfortunately, I haven't seen some here before. But then I know some where crossings, you can hear when you're going on a bus or a train, they will tell you the next stop is this, so that when you're blind, you know that the next stop where you're going is this, you can get down. The door is opening, it opens for you so that the blind person can see, and can hear and move. So they usually will use audios. And then, what's my other question? The market, yes. Where is, you see, it's all about engaging. You get it? You are talking to the community. They want this thing here. You are also looking at their health and safety bit of it. That is why it is good to have that kind of engagement. It's not everything that will be right with whatever the stakeholder is saying will be right, but you should be able to convince the person that if we put it here, for your own safety or the safety of your children, let's move it to this side. And during talk, you realize that people would understand. It's humans. It's a human thing. If you just brush it away and say, because of your health, they say, I'm putting it here, it won't work. But as you engage the person, as you give the person proof why it shouldn't be, at a point in time, you will get some understand. There'll be a compromise somewhere. But then you don't rubbish what they say, and you also don't risk their health and safety, but you have a common ground at the end of the day. It has happened so many times. I hope I answered.
Yes, please. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Pompepra, you can go ahead with your question.
Yes, Engineer Naki, thank you for your presentation. I realized that nowadays, in designing projects, we talk about a lot of environmental issues. What is the cost parameters of all of this? Since most of the time, one of the limiting factors of infrastructure development is cost.
Yeah.
How are the numbers looking? And how does it influence decision making? Thank you.
It's the cost, yes. So Kwame, I know you talk about the cost component, but obviously, the cost component is I would say it takes. I haven't looked at the percentage yet, but I don't think it's that much. But then if you ignore it because of the cost, you will have a long-term cost, which will be higher. You get it? As I said, I don't know the percentage of it to projects. Maybe I should work on that and see. But then it would, at the beginning, you might think it is costly, but then you're doing that to save the future cost you incur. You get it? Which may be higher than during design and implementation of the project. So Kwame, I'll look at the cost component and let you know, please. If I do that, will do the analysis.
You write a paper or not?
Me and you now will do this work, don't worry.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ensujinfi, you can go ahead with your question, please.
All right, thank you. Yeah, good morning, everyone. Yes,
Morning.
I have a couple of questions. The first one, I want to find out, Naki, you cited an example where people would randomly erect masts around where you live without necessarily engaging you. Question,
Yeah.
Is there any law that obligates developers to engage stakeholders in this country? Because a friend of mine who happens to be living in the UK told me that even in cases where neighbors are trying to do minor extensions to their property, they have to engage their neighbors and find out how they or what they think about the issue before they obtain the necessary permit. So I'm wondering, is there any law or something like that that is required for people to do that? That is question one. So please note it. The second one, you made a very interesting point regarding gentrification.
Yeah.
That when you are undertaking projects, you have to ensure that it doesn't lead to gentrification. Can you give me a brief on how this can be ensured? Looking at our environment as we have it, definitely, and you and I have been on several projects. When you develop an environment, the first thing you would see is it enhances development, which naturally means that there are instances where people might be forced out if maybe property owners feel that the new people who would come there would, or they stand to gain economic benefit from such transactions. So I want to find out, how do you ensure that this gentrification thing is sorted out? Thank you.
Thank you. The gentrification can only be by policies and enforcement. And that if I put a design, a design here, I put a project here. You see, unfortunately for us, our district assembly system, which is supposed to be a good thing, is not properly working as it's supposed to be. Otherwise, this shouldn't happen, that I put a road here because the area has, so if I own a land here and I'm poor and I'm not able to develop, I have to move for somebody who has money to do that. Even if it has to be done, that I have to move out, there should be some level of compensation where I will not be marginalized. You get it? Even if I have to move, the developer will have to make sure that wherever I'm moving to, I am comfortable, and my generations unborn will also be comfortable. It shouldn't be because the rich wants to be here. So it should be a national policy, let me put it that way. And we have to adhere to it. Yes, there are laws that says we should engage. In fact, before you get EPA permits and the district assembly permits for anything, what you can you can do all the studies, all the environmental and whatever studies, and represent your report to EPA. But if there is no stakeholder engagement, permits will not be given. So that's why I was surprised that they have given permits when they haven't done that. There are laws. There are laws that says, if you look at EPA's law and the LI, that has to be done before the permit is given. So Kwame, there are laws. They're supposed to engage our neighbors. And even anytime they are doing their maintenance, where they are painting the east and they're supposed to tell us so that I have to move my car. Because anytime they do that, all the cars have paint on them. I have to, at least let me know. So I move it away or cover it before you do your maintenance. But hey, this is Ghana.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll still have allow a few more questions if there are any. Engineer, I wanted to find out, you mentioned the issue of trust when it comes to stakeholder engagement. In your experience, what are some strategies that have helped you, that have been very helpful in fostering trust and collaboration amongst the stakeholders that you've had to engage with?
Oh, I think the line went a bit, if you could repeat again,
okay.
please.
Yes, I asked them, you mentioned the issue of trust when it comes to stakeholder engagement. Yes, and I wanted to find out that in your experience so far, what have been some good strategies that you have implemented and that have worked for you when it comes to engaging with stakeholders? especially within communities?
There's this unwritten rule about identifying with them. You see, you don't go into community entry is very critical. If you want to build trust, one of the things is community entry. And we usually would do that through the chiefs, honoring their chiefs and their opinion leaders. So we usually will go to the community leaders or chiefs and pay homage and identify with them. You see, you don't go in your high horse on your high horse. You identify with the people. Immediately you do that, it's nature. They would start believing you that you are one of them, and you would understand them, and then the trust is built from that way. But if you go in and you disregard what they value, their values and their cultural heritage, and you just go and mess it up because you are from the city, then there'll be an issue. But trust is built with relation. I mean, that's how you start your relation. I hope that answers.
Yes, it does. Okay, thank you very much. I think on this note, okay, so we have another question here from Nani Kwayabwa.
It has started raining, so
okay, yes, so this will be the last. This will be our last question.
The internet is fluctuating, so it's sometimes I don't hear what you say.
Right. Okay. So we'll be taking our last question here from Nani Kwayabwa, and then we wrap up the session for today.
Okay.
Yeah, good morning, Engineer Naki. Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. So during your presentation, you mentioned that it's very important that we employ and train local content. And so I'll be happy if you can share some strategies on how we can manage local content, because we have a case in hand where two contractors on the same stretch of road, one employed about 70% of the local content, and then the other about 30%. But the issues we have with the local content are quite high. And so I'll be happy if you can share your experiences or any strategy that you have. Thank you.
You see, the workforce always doesn't have to be skilled. Usually contractors will require some unskilled labor. So there are instances where the unskilled labor are taken on, and over the period of time that they are there, they are trained and they acquire skills to be able to fit into the skilled side. So it's as we're talking about 30%, we shouldn't only always look at the skilled labor. If we look at that, we may not be able to fill that gap. But then we can also start from the unskilled side, where we can have few laborers, and over time, as they are in, if the contractor can go ahead and do some training for them to be able to move to the other side. That's what I've seen so far that people do, that contractors do, to be able to get some local content. Because if you're looking at the skill, you may not get it from the community.
Okay, thank you very much. I think at this point, we'll be wrapping up our session for today. I'd like to say a very big thank you to Engineer Mrs. Jane Naki-Tetteh-Nui for the enlightening presentation, and then also for the engaging Q&A session. We appreciate the thoughtful questions and active participation from our audience as well. This session has provided us with valuable insights into the importance of inclusion and social equity in sustainable infrastructure projects. We look forward to more engaging discussions in our upcoming K&E series, and I bid you all a wonderful day today. Do enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you, Engineer. Thank you very much.